Hi, my name is Alara Monroe, and I'm 38 years old. I live a quiet life now in a cabin nestled deep within the forest just outside of Ashridge, Oregon. A place so peaceful it almost makes you forget what the world is capable of. From the outside, everything about me looks unremarkable. A faded wooden easel sits by the window, brushes soaked in muted reds and stormy grays, and half-finished canvases lean against the walls like they're holding secrets too heavy to complete. Most people who walk into my gallery see just another reclusive artist clinging to nostalgia and paint. But that's exactly the version of me I've allowed them to see. Last night, that illusion cracked. It started with a simple envelope, ivory, embossed, pretentious. Summit Valley Preparatory School, 20th Anniversary Alumni Gala. I nearly tossed it in the fireplace. But curiosity is a sharp-edged thing. I hadn't seen most of those people in 2 decades, not since the days I was known as the girl with paint on her hands and thrift store shoes. So I went. I wore a second-hand navy blue dress, a pair of flats with worn soles, and a name tag that was misprinted. Elora. It read, not Alara. I didn't correct it. It matched the theme of the evening. Wrong in just the right ways. The venue was a private club in downtown Charlotte Hill, North Carolina. Crystal chandeliers glowed above polished marble floors, and flutes of champagne passed like currency between conversations. No one recognized me at first. I moved like a ghost through the glittering crowd. The people I remembered from my teenage years, now older, wealthier, shinier, barely glanced in my direction. Their suits were tailored to perfection, their laughter calculated, and their eyes always scanning for someone more valuable. I had spent years in war zones and safe houses, under aliases and under fire. But this was the battlefield I had nearly forgotten, vanity dressed in designer labels. Then came the moment I'd silently prepared myself for. Alara, you came, trilled a voice drenched in sarcasm. It was Ava Whitmore, draped in blood-red satin that shimmered like danger itself. Diamonds danced on her neck, and her perfume arrived 3 seconds before she did. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nice dress. Thrifted. I replied evenly. It was my grandmother's. How quaint. She leaned in closer. You still painting sunflowers on garage doors? I didn't answer. Giving her silence was better than handing her satisfaction. Around her, a few of our former classmates snickered, those brittle, mocking laughs that reek of insecurity disguised as elitism. Then she said, louder this time for the crowd, some people retire early. Some just never start. I turned away before I did something regrettable, or deeply satisfying. At the buffet table, I found someone familiar, Riley Walsh. She was inspecting a shrimp cocktail like it had secrets to tell. Her sharp bob haircut and quick, analytical gaze hadn't changed since our high school debate team days. Alara Monroe, she said, taking a slow sip of wine. The only alum who showed up without a single designer label on her body. You noticed. I notice everything, especially the ones everyone else ignores. She tilted her head. You always liked being underestimated, didn't you? Sometimes it's useful. You ever think of telling your side of the story? I gave her a sideways look. Which one? There are too many. Fair enough, she said with a half-smile and walked off. That's when I saw him, Gavin Reeds. He approached holding 2 glasses of wine, not quite meeting my eyes. Alara, he said, the words sticking to his throat. Gavin. It's good to see you. Is it? He hesitated, then gave a sad laugh. You look well. You don't. He flinched at that, glancing over his shoulder where Ava was laughing with a circle of men in expensive suits. When he turned back to me, his face was blank. You still paint every day? I nodded. But he was already walking away, hands trembling just enough for me to notice. I moved to the edge of the ballroom, leaning against the wall and watching. The whole room pulsed with performative charm, choreographed hugs, self-deprecating jokes rehearsed to perfection, and subtle power plays dressed as compliments. They didn't see me. Not really. But I saw them. Every lie. Every mask. Every weakness. Then the room dimmed. Ava clinked her glass with a silver spoon and stepped into the spotlight like a queen anointing her kingdom. "Thank you all for coming," she beamed. "It's truly incredible to see how far we've come. So many success stories, and of course, some people have taken interesting paths." The laughter that followed didn't come from everyone but enough. She never said my name. She didn't have to. Every word was a scalpel with my initials carved into the handle. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. Later, I stood near the tall windows, watching silent fireworks burst in red and gold across the North Carolina sky, war paint across a velvet canvas. I whispered to myself, "You think you know who I am, but you don't." And for the first time in years, I realized, maybe it was time they did. The morning after the gala, the champagne was still sitting untouched on the dresser in my cabin, flat, warm, and dusted with a fine shimmer of neglect. I didn't pour it out. I didn't drink it either. I just let my fingers rest on the rim of the glass for a moment and then pulled them away. My hands were steady now. They hadn't been last night, not when Ava Whitmore raised her flute and delivered that razor-edged toast. Not out of shame, but from the restraint it took not to react. My cabin, tucked far outside Ashridge, was quiet, almost oppressively so. The only sound was the steady ticking of a wall clock, military regulation, just like everything else in the room.
Cut.
Olive wool blanket. Drawers lined up like soldiers. The space was functional, not sentimental. Even the canvas resting on the easel in the corner was all sharp gray strokes and no emotion. Nothing finished. Nothing pretty. I stared at the invitation again. Summit Valley Preparatory Alumni Gala, 20 years later. Gilded script on expensive cardstock, like time could be rewritten with just enough gold trim. Ava hadn't just inherited our parents' fortune. She'd taken the house, the investments, even the family foundation. But the worst part wasn't what she took, it was how. Our father was always obsessed with legacy. "The Monroe name means control," he once told us, staring through us like we were quarterly reports. Ava played the perfect air, straight A's, polished smiles, performative humility. I was quiet. I was real. And when they died in that crash, I didn't cry at the funeral. Ava did. Loudly. Publicly. 3 months later, she presented her version of the will. Updated, she claimed. Notarized. Ironclad. Unchallengeable, unless I wanted to fight it in court for years. I didn't fight. Not over marble floors and oil paintings. Not over a name I no longer trusted. So I walked away. But walking isn't escaping. 6 months later, the call came. Not directly from the Pentagon, of course, first a recruiter, then another. They didn't ask if I could lead. They asked how far I was willing to disappear. I passed the psychological screening, the physical trials. Something in the way I didn't blink when they screamed in my face made someone take notice. At 23, I was assigned to Phantom Echo, a unit that didn't officially exist. We didn't wear uniforms. We didn't carry rank. We memorized names, burned identities, and buried our pasts. I was told to use art as my cover, something believable for an introvert with precision and patience. That part, at least, was easy. The hardest part? Silence. But I had mastered silence long before they gave it a purpose. For nearly a decade, I lived between shadows and smokescreens. Sometimes I delivered intel. Sometimes I extracted it. Sometimes I just watched and let others burn. There was one condition: no contact. Especially not with family. Ava became a distant echo. But echoes linger. That night at the gala shifted something in me. Maybe it was the way Gavin Reed's looked like he'd been holding his breath for 20 years. Maybe it was Riley's question, "You ever think of telling your side of the story?" Or maybe it was just the way Ava still needed a crowd to define her power. That night, after I returned to the cabin, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the one with the hidden false bottom. Tucked inside was a flash drive. Not for memory's sake, but for leverage. Technically, I wasn't supposed to copy anything from Phantom Echo. Strictly prohibited. But I had. Not operations that risked lives, but trails, patterns, names of those who thought they were invisible. I hadn't touched that drive in years. But something was already in motion. The knock on my door came the next morning. I froze. I didn't panic. I was trained not to. I moved to the side, silent, brushing my fingertips across the sketch pad under which my Glock was concealed. I opened the door slowly. No one was there. Just an envelope. It had my name on it. My real name. And the handwriting, I hadn't seen it in years. Inside was a photo. Me and Ava, probably 17. I was in fatigues, fresh from ROTC camp. She was already wearing pearls, sculpted like the prototype for someone else's ambition. The picture had been cut straight down the middle, a purposeful, clinical tear. On the back was a yellow post-it note. The past never forgets. Neither do I. I stared at it for a long time. Not in fear. In recognition. They didn't just mock me. They needed me forgotten. Later that day, I drove into the city for brunch, a follow-up event from the gala. Same alumni crowd. Same glittering lies. Same Ava, standing center stage at a long table in the gardens of the Langford estate in Raleigh. Warsaw was just the beginning, she was saying, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. It's not about local anymore. It's about scale, influence, transnational leverage. People around her nodded, impressed, envious. I watched silently. Then she turned to me. "Ilara," she said with syrupy warmth. "You remember Warsaw, don't you? That mural project with that little artist collective? You loved those starving artists." I tilted my head. "Funny," I said. "I thought you were in Jakarta that quarter." A beat of silence stretched too long. Grace Weaver, seated nearby, paused mid-sip. Gavin coughed into his napkin. Riley, sitting farther down the table, raised an eyebrow and subtly pulled out her phone. Ava's smile strained. "Oh, darling, you know how it is. Flight schedules. It all blurs together." "Of course," I replied, though export licenses usually remember quite clearly, especially in Eastern Europe. Tricky things. Troy Maddox dropped his fork. It clattered on his plate, shattering the illusion. Ava's grip tightened on her champagne flute. Her eyes sharpened. "Some of us take risks, Ilara. That's what leaders do." I met her gaze, calm as a blade. "I suppose it depends on who writes the report afterward." Then I stood, slowly, and walked away before she could engineer a response. Riley caught up with me near the hedges. "What the hell was that?" she asked, breathless, half laughing. "Just brunch," I said, voice light. "You baited them?" "No," I said, pausing. "I reminded them I exist." Back at the cabin that evening, I stared at the photo again, the one from the envelope. The slash between me and Ava looked sharper under the lamplight, like a scar pretending to be paper. I could almost hear her voice from years ago, standing outside our mother's ICU room, thinking I was out of earshot. "She doesn't belong in this family," Ava had whispered. Our mother hadn't responded. Maybe silence was the answer she had learned from our father too. Brunch had ended in a haze of flat laughter and fake hugs. Ava didn't come near me again. Neither did Gavin. But Riley? She gave me a long, pointed look before leaving. Her thumb hovered over her phone screen like she was deciding whether to pull a pin. I returned home expecting silence. Instead, I found chaos. The moment I opened the door, I knew something was off. The easel was on the ground. The canvas slashed. Drawers yanked open, contents spilled like a robbery staged by someone who knew exactly what to look for. Nothing else was missing except one thing. The flash drive. It had been hidden in a false compartment at the bottom of the drawer, camouflaged so well that only someone who knew what they were looking for would have found it. And only one other person in the world had grown up with the same dresser, the same habit of hiding candy and secrets in hollow wood. Ava. I stood in the wreckage of my studio for a moment, unmoving. Then I picked up the ruined canvas and laid it gently on the table like it deserved a burial. The drive didn't contain direct evidence against me, but it did hold fragments of redacted memos, movements, identities, and operations Ava could use to discredit me, or worse. But that wasn't the real mistake. The mistake was touching my space. They thought they were clever. They forgot who I used to be. I moved like the operative I once was, silent, efficient. I swept the broken glass, dismantled the drawer, noted the lack of fingerprints, the precision. It was professional, but not perfect. Overconfident. They didn't expect me to track what they took. Downstairs, beneath the cabin, what once was a wine cellar had long been transformed into a digital ops room. 6 ultra-wide monitors curved in a half-circle, glowing with live feeds and surveillance relays. A biometric scanner confirmed my identity with a soft beep. I was in. My hands moved before my thoughts did. Each gift bag handed out at the alumni gala had an RFID tag. Harmless, they said, for tracking gift returns and entries. But I'd rewritten mine before I even stepped into the ballroom. Now I activated the tags. Most were idle, static, but one moved. A pulsing signal, traveling rapidly. Charlotte Hill, Chicago, Frankfurt, Riyadh, Dubai. I zoomed in. There it was, magnolia-embossed wrapping, still intact. I opened a secure comms line. Lieutenant Harris, I said. A pause. Static then. Alara. It's been a while. Priority trace. Civilian breach. Item code. Serpent Echo 9. Hold on, pinging Dubai node. Yeah, found it. Movement through a shell firm called, get this, Cambridge Heritage Trust. Sound familiar? I didn't even blink. Ava's fingerprints. She's sloppy. Want me to flag the node?
No.
I want surveillance. I want to know who accesses it next.
Copy that.
You're spinning back up? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Just as I was tracing the firm's banking nodes, Riley called. Her voice was sharp, controlled, but I heard the urgency. I dug into Ava's PR campaign. Remember the Global Impact Awards last year? The PR firm she hired doesn't exist. No tax ID. No postal record. Just cash wires from a Luxembourg intermediary. Send the logs. I'm already ahead of you, she said. Alara, this is bigger than we thought. I know, I replied, eyes fixed on the screen. I'm already inside. I launched a deep scan through every bank route tied to Cambridge Heritage Trust. The name sounded elegant, clean, but it screamed arrogance. The kind of name someone like Ava would use to pretend legacy equaled immunity. 12 accounts surfaced. 4 routed through the Cayman Islands. 3 through Cyprus. 1 was flagged red by a dormant DoD intel net called Wolverine Watch. I hadn't touched that system in over 5 years. I keyed in the access code. The screen split into 4 quadrants: container movements, intercepted drone footage, shipping manifests. 1 location kept flashing. Halbert Logistics, Indianapolis, Indiana. Owned by Cambridge Heritage Trust. Flagged for suspected arms trafficking. Timestamp: 3 days ago. I opened a comms line again. It took a full minute before the signal stabilized. Then came the voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. Monroe, said General Keene. No greeting. No small talk. I assume this is about the breach. Yes, sir. Ava Whitmore is running operations through legacy fronts. I need Operation Pale River reactivated. Quietly. You were out. I was. Now I'm not. There was silence. Then he said it. The satellites are listening again. Halbert Logistics is confirmed. Intel from Interpol cross-checked it. It's gone red. And you waited until now? You weren't asking before. This is surgical, I said. No boots. Not yet. But I'm moving. You'll need clearance. I paused at the biometric reader. My hand hovered. And if I fail? We disavow. I pressed my palm flat. The scanner lit green. That's when I realized, the moment they stole from me, they gave me permission to return. And this time, I wasn't painting sunflowers. The gallery in downtown Savannah wasn't anything special, just polished white walls, curated lighting, and enough cheap wine to convince rich collectors they understood art. That's why I chose it. Pretentious, but inattentive. It was the perfect venue to make noise while looking invisible. The painting hung at the far end of a narrow corridor. I titled it Weight of Silence. Large swathes of muted gray formed jagged intersections. Streaks of crimson slashed across the canvas like open wounds, and tiny gold veins ran through them, subtle, almost buried. To the average viewer, it looked like chaos. But anyone trained in digital pattern recognition, anyone using the imaging software Ava's people relied on, would know better. It wasn't just art. It was a message, a cipher, a location,
A time.
I painted it over 3 nights using a grid only satellite-level resolution could decode. Then I uploaded a high-resolution image to a database quietly flagged for federal interest. Ava would see it. She would think she was in control. She wasn't. 20 minutes after the gallery opened, Riley arrived. She wore a borrowed press badge and carried herself like she was part of the crowd. Her heels clicked softly on the floor as she moved to the canvas, paused, and studied it. "Your work's changed," she murmured. "It always changes," I said. "Especially when you're saying things no one wants to hear." Her brow arched slightly. "Are you saying something?" "I'm always saying something. Most people just don't speak the language." She lifted her phone and snapped a picture. I didn't stop her. The post she would make, disguised with a poetic caption, would trigger metadata filters on known smuggling platforms used by Ava's team. I had buried hash keys in the image compression. Once uploaded, the signal would be picked up by the wrong people, traced and followed right where I wanted them. I spotted 2 men across the gallery pretending not to watch me. One wore a jacket too heavy for the temperature. The other hadn't touched his wine. Their eyes flicked toward the door as Grace Weaver entered. That was unexpected. Grace wasn't invited. She scanned the room with the practiced posture of someone used to dominance. Then her eyes landed on the painting. She walked toward it. Slowly. Deliberately. "You are never sentimental," she said as she joined me. "I'm not." "Then why this?" "The color, the title. It feels like grief." "It's about silence," I said. "The kind that fills a room after someone lies, and no one calls it out." She stared for a long second, then turned away. "Just paint," I added. "Nothing more." She stayed long enough for the agents to tag her phone's signal. The moment had passed. The trap was set. I slipped out through the back, where a car with no plates waited in the alley. The glass was blacked out. No driver visible. I slid in without a word. The surveillance began that night. Grace didn't call or email, but her security system logged 3 perimeter alerts in 10 minutes. She checked the footage. Just static. Then she opened her door. And saw it. A blank canvas. Same size as Weight of Silence. No frame. No brush strokes. Just clean white gesso. She brought it inside, flipped it over. Scrawled in red paint across the back. "Silence has a weight. You're about to feel it." Back at my cabin, I descended into the ops room. The digital command center buzzed like a hive coming alive. Riley was already on the encrypted video feed, her background blurred. "I traced the Belridge initiative," she said without introduction. "It's one of Ava's shells. Registered in Montana, funneled through a dormant environmental nonprofit. But check this, Grace Weaver is listed as the acting director." My eyes narrowed. So Grace has been laundering for Ava too?
Worse.
She's the compliance shield. She signs off on all foreign donation reports. She doesn't know everything, but she knows enough. Time to rattle her. That night, I compiled falsified documents. Real numbers, faked context. Just enough to suggest that Grace was orchestrating financial crimes through the Belridge shell. Enough to terrify her. I delivered it anonymously through a timed email drop. Riley tracked her reaction live. "She's panicking," she whispered through the comm. "Just asked Ava to meet on the rooftop terrace. No press. Private."
Perfect.
Riley positioned a hidden camera 2 balconies over, angled through a sculpture of steel mesh. We watched the feed together. Grace's voice shook. "That fund isn't mine. I never signed any of those transactions." Ava's tone was sharp and lethal. "Don't insult me. I haven't. You're either loyal, or you're dead weight." Then came the slap. Crisp. Unapologetic. Vanessa, Ava, leaned in close, eyes narrow. "Try to explain your name when the auditors come." Grace stood frozen. Ava turned and walked away. By morning, Riley had edited the rooftop footage into a tight 22-second clip. She leaked it to a niche investigative news feed known for political scandal. The headline read, "Rooftop Slap. What's behind the tension in the Cambridge Trust?" It exploded. Within hours, it had over 500,000 views. The Cambridge board reacted immediately. Grace's accounts were frozen. Her devices locked. Her calendar wiped. She was being cut out from the inside. And I hadn't even shown my face. The next morning, a secure message appeared on my offline drive. Fingerprinted, encrypted. It was from Grace. "If I help you, will you erase my name from your list?" I didn't hesitate. I typed 2 words. "Start talking." Grace talked. She didn't confess out of guilt. People like her rarely do. She talked because fear is louder than loyalty when your world begins to collapse. The documents she sent were precise, digital, and damning. Dates, wire transfers, digital signatures, proof that Ava's operations had spread across multiple fronts: logistics firms, shell charities, global art campaigns used to launder money and move code. Everything Ava touched was wrapped in philanthropy and sealed with a self-congratulatory press release. But the real revelation came in the legal archives. The Monroe Family Trust, which Ava had renamed the Cambridge Legacy Endowment, still kept its legal records in the family's old law firm downtown. I hadn't stepped foot in that building since I was 17. That day, I was screaming at Ava in the middle of the reading room, demanding to know how she'd manipulated a clause neither of us fully understood. She just smiled and said, "You'll walk away from this family, Alara. I'll make sure you're empty when you do." And she did. But this time I didn't go in angry. I went in methodical. The new clerk, a retired partner in his 80s, greeted me with quiet surprise. His hands shook as he handed me the digitized archive on an old USB stick. "You two were always so different," he said. "She came in with an entourage. You come alone." I said nothing. I took the drive and left. Back at the cabin, I plugged the archive into my isolated system. Riley patched in via secured relay, her voice crisp. "Start with anything after 2015. That's when Ava started laundering."
I did.
I found a fund listed as the Everlight Foundation, supposedly created for education reform. On the surface, it was legitimate: grants to schools in Eastern Europe, consulting partnerships, charity awards. But when I traced the donations, they led to non-existent campuses and a consulting firm in Vienna with no registered staff or address. "These IDs," Riley said, her tone shifting. "They match the arms trail from Halberd Logistics. Alara, this isn't just smuggling. This is state-level coordination." The last authorization on the Everlight Foundation? Signed by Gavin Reeds. I froze. Not visibly. Not right away. My body remembered how to hide emotion before my mind had time to catch up. I was back by that pond in 2011, telling Gavin I had enlisted. He didn't try to stop me, just said, "I hope you know what you're giving up." He knew. Even then. Now, over a decade later, his signature was the one that had made Ava's laundering operations seem legitimate. "I need to see him," I said. Riley didn't object. We met at a bar in downtown Columbia, South Carolina. Quiet, upscale, forgettable, designed for the kind of men who pay to have their guilt disappear in top-shelf liquor and dark leather booths. He was already seated. Dark suit. Clean-shaven. Older, but not wiser. "I figured you'd come," he said. I didn't sit. "Why did you sign for her?" He looked tired. I was a buffer. She needed someone clean to make it look real. For smuggling routes? For shell foundations. It wasn't supposed to be that. He exhaled. It started as tax shielding. Then it grew. She got bold. I kept signing. "How many people paid the price for your clean image, Gavin?" He looked up at me, stripped of excuses. "Too many." He leaned in, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "I can fix it." "You don't get redemption," I said. "But you can be useful." He nodded. They say cornered animals lash out. But they forget, some of us choose the corner. Some of us wait for it. Ava didn't just lash out. She struck. It started with an anonymous post, clipped footage of me during a humanitarian op in 2012, grainy and distorted. The voiceover twisted my words. It looked like I was discussing how to redistribute military funds. No context. Just enough poison. An hour later, it was on conservative news sites. Decorated operative accused of Pentagon embezzlement. By nightfall, my photo, military uniform, name, rank, was plastered beside the headline. Artistic fraud turned national disgrace. I didn't flinch. This wasn't rage. This was strategy. She wanted to dismantle me before the full weight of the truth reached her.
Fine.
Let her try. In my underground ops room, Riley and I launched our counterplay. She scraped every comment thread, every article, every metadata string connected to Ava's shell foundations. I tapped into the backup servers tied to the Everlight Foundation. Then I slid a thick brown envelope across the desk. Inside, a full printout of Gavin's emails. Timestamps. Authorization chains. His handwriting. The final note was scrawled across a sticky tab. My silence was the lie. Use this. I picked up the phone. One secure call. It rang 3 times. General Keane answered. You've seen the smear? I asked. Half my office forwarded it. We know it's surgical. I want a formal review.
Pause.
You understand what that means? I do. I uploaded the full package. Voice prints, customs documents, intercepted donation chains, IP logs tracing transactions from Georgia to Dubai to Indianapolis. The evidence built itself like a storm cloud. Once I submitted the digital affidavit with my old operative ID, there was no going back. The system hummed. A few minutes later, the secure line buzzed. The counsel's voice was calm. You understand this makes it official? They'll know who you are. Truth isn't power, I said, until you let it echo. The classified hearing room inside the Pentagon smelled like cold steel and older secrets. No windows, no flags, no nameplates, just gray walls thicker than trust and a single oak table positioned beneath a humming LED light. I sat alone on one side, facing 2 men I knew by posture if not by introduction. General Keane was one of them, his posture still forward-leaning, dominant without aggression. The second man, Counselor Beck from the Department of Military Ethics, was harder to read. His expression was unreadable, hands folded, eyes like wet stone. Keane spoke first. You've submitted the complete packet? Yes. I slid the encrypted drive across the table, even though he already had it. Procedure mattered in rooms like this. Every movement was a message. The screen behind them came to life. Each node of evidence opened like a chain reaction. Satellite imagery of the Halberd Logistics warehouse in Indiana, thermal scans showing military-grade crates beneath fake NGO supplies, customs logs from Eastern Europe signed by Ava, donation records rerouted through Cambridge legacy accounts, and IP traces from her shell organizations tying it all together. I narrated as the nodes loaded. These packages were labeled as development kits, meant for rural education, but contain AI-aided firing modules and drone casings. The visual signatures confirm modular weapon components. Beck raised an eyebrow. And your sister's connection to this? I tapped the next file. Voice print overlays from her gala speech 3 months ago. Matched at 97.8% with the person authorizing these deliveries. Signatures line up. So does the cadence.
She didn't just know.
She orchestrated it. Supporting witnesses? Gavin Reeds has signed a sworn statement. Grace Weaver turned over internal memos and confirmed direct contact with Ava about laundering protocols. Beck leaned back. So, let's be clear. You're alleging Ava Whitmore, philanthropist, public entrepreneur, co-founder of multiple international firms, built and managed a smuggling network under the Monroe Trust infrastructure. She didn't inherit it, I said flatly. She built it. A silence fell. Keane finally nodded. We're activating Silent Strike Protocol. Operation Glass Curtain. Digital interference. Financial freezes. Subpoena deliveries, no headlines. Not yet. He reached into a drawer and slid a thick black envelope across the table. Delivery date, Magnolia White Gala, November 12th. She'll be there. I stared at the envelope for a beat. It felt heavier than its size. like everything I'd buried for 2 decades was folded into that matte cardstock, sealed under a federal stamp. Beck cleared his throat. There's one more matter. If this reaches public trial, you'll be required to testify under your real name. Are you prepared for that? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my satchel and laid a small black case on the table. Inside, folded precisely, was my military service jacket. Rank stripes clean. Nameplate untarnished. Keen didn't touch it, but his eyes lingered. Beck gave a near imperceptible nod. The encrypted tablet beside us blinked to life. Riley's face appeared on screen. Media packets almost ready, she said. National release. Dossier, video edit, verified sources, all wrapped. Just waiting for your word. Hold it, I said. Let it detonate with the gala. Keen stood. You're clear to proceed. Transportation will be arranged. I picked up the envelope, slid it into my coat pocket. It rested against my ribs like a second spine. As I walked out, the containment doors behind me hissed shut. Not an end. A lock clicking into place. The sky outside was still gray, but the air tasted sharper. I never needed them to believe me. I just needed them to hear me. And the world was about to listen. Inside the ballroom of the Magnolia White Gala, everything sparkled, from the chandeliers to the lie Ava was wearing like silk. Her dress was ivory, floor-length regal. Her voice rang clear across the marble walls as she praised innovation, legacy, and the spirit of unity. She lifted her glass. Tonight, she said, we celebrate not just growth, but the roots that made it possible. Applause rose like steam from the crowd. At the back of the room, I stepped through the doors, flanked by 2 federal agents in plain suits. The velvet curtains swayed behind me. Whispers rose. Heads turned. At first, no one recognized me. Not until the lights shifted. Not until Ava saw my face. The live feed flickered. Behind her, the giant screen displaying her company logo pixelated, then transformed. New imagery appeared. Documents, wire logs, shipment manifests, signatures, voice clips. Each one stamped with a header, Cambridge Legacy Trust. Gasps spread like fire through the room. Then my voice echoed from the speakers. For years, these networks thrived behind philanthropic fronts. Tonight, we show you what hid behind the speeches. Riley's voice followed, this time broadcasting from a media panel in the back. The whistleblower's evidence includes signed statements, satellite data, and transaction logs. The board's own signatures are part of the chain. Ethan Crane froze where he stood near the bar. His face drained of color.
He didn't run. He didn't speak.
Then I stepped forward and dropped my cloak. Underneath, my military uniform gleamed in the chandelier light. I stood straight, silent, unshakable. The room erupted into whispers and clicking cameras. Ava didn't crumble. She smiled. Too tightly. Too late. The federal agents moved. One read from a sealed document. Ava Whitmore, you are under investigation for federal export violations, illicit financial activity, and conspiracy to traffic arms internationally. Her smirk returned, bitter and elegant. You think this ends with me? She asked, and turned to look directly at Ethan. It was never about the end. It was always about the unraveling. And hers had just begun. No alarms went off. No screaming. No collapse of chandeliers or desperate lunges for the exits. Just a single red light blinking quietly on a server deep inside a Luxembourg bank. The first warning. Within 3 minutes, 2 more banking institutions, one in Singapore and one in Zurich, mirrored the same freeze command. Every account linked to the Cambridge Legacy Trust was locked down. Ava's empire didn't explode. It imploded. And by the time the morning headlines reached the front pages, the name Ilara Monroe was no longer whispered in shadows. It was printed in full, bold font across every major network in the country. The Department of Defense held an emergency press conference behind closed doors. Inside the same hearing room where I had delivered my evidence, I now sat again, this time facing a full panel of federal officials. My posture was steady, my voice level. I didn't add emotion. I didn't need to. I let the facts speak, each one sharper than the last. Behind the two-way mirror, General Keynes stood silently. He never interrupted. By day 2, Gavin Reeds resigned from the board of the Cambridge Foundation. His statement was brief, no excuses, no deflections. He admitted to poor judgment, acknowledged Ava's manipulation, and promised full cooperation with the federal investigation. The financial world reacted like blood had been spilled in water. Stocks tied to Ava's name plummeted. Investors fled. Partners began scrubbing their websites. Lawsuits were filed within 48 hours. Donors pulled out of anything she had touched. Then came Grace Weaver. She appeared on camera, visibly tired but steady. She admitted her part in the financial laundering scheme, claiming she had believed Ava's PR narrative. In exchange for her testimony, she was granted immunity. Her admission trended within the hour. Ava's circle collapsed faster than any of us expected. Behind the scenes, Riley worked like a woman possessed. Her newsroom transformed into a war room, walls covered in diagrams, photos, red string connections, timelines, and declassified memos. At the center of her final segment was a single childhood photograph. 2 girls in identical school uniforms. One, laughing brightly. The other, me, squinting into the sun. That Sunday, Riley's story aired across the country in prime time. Her narration cut through everything. For years, the world saw Ava Whitmore, entrepreneur, visionary, builder of legacies. But behind every polished photo op stood the sister she tried to erase. Tonight, we finally hear the truth of Alara Monroe. Clips played. Me in uniform. Me painting. Me walking through the courtroom. Experts gave commentary. Riley narrated Ava's paper trail with surgical clarity. One by one, donors, politicians, and silent co-conspirators were named. I watched from my cabin in Ashridge, alone.
I didn't cry.
I didn't smile. I simply turned off the screen and opened the window. The air was cold.
Honest.
Later that night, as the wind rattled the trees, I received an encrypted message. It had no sender ID, but the biometric signature confirmed the source.
Grace.
You erased me from the crosshairs. If I give you more, will you make sure I disappear from the story too? I typed back one word.
Yes.
Because I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to be louder than Ava's legacy. And it was. Weeks later, I visited what was left of our childhood estate. The Monroe House no longer stood as a monument to family control. It had been turned into the Monroe Center for Arts and Youth Outreach. The front gates now had a plaque where Ava's name had once been, replaced with a dedication to those whose voices were silenced. I walked through the gardens where Mother once dictated the height of every rosebush. Now children ran freely between easels and paint-splattered benches. Lexi, the young cadet I'd met months earlier, was there. She handed me a set of keys she'd found during the renovation. We think they belong to your studio, she said. You should be the one to decide what to do with them. I closed her hand gently around them. Let them paint the walls if they want. Let them build something new. She smiled. They already have. I walked through the house one final time, not to reclaim it, but to release it. On my way out, I dropped the keys in the donation box by the main office. That same afternoon, I stood in a different kind of building, gray concrete, humming fluorescent lights, no warmth at all. The Federal Detention Center, where Ava now resided. The guard nodded and unlocked the visitation door. Inside, Ava sat at a steel table. She didn't stand, didn't smirk. Her eyes met mine and narrowed. I hope you're proud, she said. You took everything. I sat down slowly. No, I said. I just refused to disappear. She scoffed but didn't argue. We sat in silence. At one point, her gaze flickered to the side. Once we shared a room, a name, a story. Now we shared nothing. When the guard tapped the glass, I stood. Ava didn't look back. Outside, Lexi waited in the parking lot with something wrapped in brown paper. It's not finished, she said. But I think it belongs to you. I opened the wrapping. A painting. Dark strokes. Sharp, violent. But in the center, just a crack of gold. Not glowing. Not healing. Just honest. She had titled it, Silence Broken. I didn't speak. I just held it. Because sometimes the best justice doesn't come with noise. Sometimes it arrives in a single line of truth, and that's all it needs to burn. I didn't attend press tours. I didn't take interviews. The inbox overflowed, journalists, networks, biographers all offering platforms, documentaries, even book deals. I forwarded everything to Riley with a single message. Let the truth echo. Not my name. She replied with just a heart emoji and nothing else. General King called briefly just once. You have options now, he said. I always did, I replied. I just stopped hiding from them. Recognition was never my goal. But that didn't stop the letters from arriving. One morning, just after dawn, a folded card arrived by courier. The Pentagon seal was embossed in gold, its weight firm but quiet. Inside was a commendation for operational excellence in civilian integrated intelligence and an invitation to a private award ceremony at Arlington. I didn't respond. I didn't need medals. The truth was metal enough. Later that same day, I stepped out onto the front porch of my cabin and found something waiting at the base of the steps. Gavin had been there. He didn't knock. Didn't wait. He'd left a canvas, unframed, unfinished. His brushwork was raw, unpolished. Attached to the back was a handwritten note. You saved more than just lives. I didn't hang it. I just leaned it against the mantel. That afternoon, Riley called to say her investigative piece had been nominated for a National Journalism Award. We did it, she said softly. But even through the pride in her voice, I heard the weight of everything we'd uncovered still sitting on her chest like a stone. We didn't speak for long. We didn't need to. A few days later, I met someone who changed everything again. Lexi had arranged a visit to the courthouse in Wilmington, where a young girl was waiting. No press. No fanfare. Just a 16-year-old with too thin sleeves and a sketch pad pressed tightly to her chest. She didn't ask for an autograph. Didn't even say her name. Just one question. Are you the one who teaches silence? I looked at her. Really looked. And saw the ache I used to carry, the ache to be heard without screaming, to be seen without performing. I nodded and opened the door. Later that month, Jax, my old field partner, sent a secure message. The agency was launching a silent mentorship program for retired shadow operatives. Not combat. Not surveillance. Just guidance, for those who'd done everything in the dark and no longer wanted to vanish quietly. I didn't respond. But I didn't delete the message either. A few evenings later, I returned to the gallery in Savannah where Weight of Silence still hung on the far wall. It hadn't been moved. Still unsigned. Still unclaimed. But the room was full. No one took selfies. No one spoke. People just stood there, staring. I walked up quietly, brushing my fingers along the edge of the frame. Not to straighten it. Just to feel the grain. Beside me, a woman whispered, I've never seen anything like it. It hurts, but in a necessary way. I nodded, but said nothing. Then I turned to leave. Just before the exit, a man in a corduroy blazer stepped into my path. His voice was gentle, unsure. Are you the artist? I looked him in the eye and felt no need to lie. No, I said. Just someone who remembers. Closure rarely arrives like thunder. It comes like a door clicking quietly shut behind you. Weeks passed. I found a small town along the Carolina coast. The kind of place where the ocean didn't ask questions and the sky didn't demand explanations. I rented a studio above an old bookstore. No name on the door. No schedule. Just peace. My paintings changed. No more hidden ciphers. No encrypted messages. Just raw color. Honest strokes. Wounds and light. One morning, while walking the shoreline at dawn, I slipped my hand into my jacket pocket and felt something smooth, cold metal. It was the flash drive. I'd stitched it into the inner lining. Out of habit. Out of caution. Not because I needed it anymore, but because I knew
someone else might.
Back in the studio, I placed the drive into a box, sealed it, and labeled it in my own handwriting. For when silence becomes unbearable, Then I took it to the Orion Talon archives, walked through the secured corridor one last time, and left it there with no return address. As I turned to go, Riley stood waiting in the hallway.
She didn't speak.
She just handed me a copy of her new book, The Invisible General. I didn't open it. Some truths are for others now. Sometime later, a private memorial was held for those who had served in silence, those who had no headstones, no press, no medals. I was invited. I went, not for applause, but for remembrance. There was no fanfare, just a half-circle of chairs, a folded cloth bearing the Orion Talon insignia, and at the center a small wooden box holding nothing but a simple medal. Jack stood, placed it in my palm. No ribbon, no case, just the weight of meaning. For what they'll never print, he whispered. I nodded. For what they'll never know. Then something unexpected. Lexi stepped forward. She held a single sheet of paper and read aloud. Because one woman refused to vanish. I found my voice. Because she stood firm in the shadows. I now walk in daylight. Because she spoke truth when it was easier to lie. I know my name matters. No one moved. No one clapped. And that's how I knew it was real. Later that night, back in the studio, I opened the door to find another girl waiting outside. Jacket too thin. Sketchpad pressed close. Same question. Are you the one who teaches silence? I smiled softly. And nodded again. They tried to silence me with shame. Erase me with lies. Bury me behind the success they stole. But truth has a rhythm of its own. And when it speaks, it thunders. Because when courage outlasts corruption, even empires that seemed untouchable will fall.
They tried to write my story for me.
I rewrote the ending. And I signed it with silence.